Welcome back to America's Voice Live. One thing the COVID-19 pandemic exposed for everyone to see is how much so-called science is ruled by politics, political science. And clearly it's no different over at the CDC, which is pretty frightening. Dr. John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, has the proof to back that claim up. In an article for Real Clear Politics, he talked about it at length. He joins me now to discuss it in detail. Doctor, good to see you as always.
Happy New Year.
So, I mean, you're probably as, I don't know. I'm shocked but not surprised by all the revelations coming out as to what was going on in the back doors of Twitter. First, it was the FBI making directives. And then I hear writers like Alex Berenson, former New York Times writer that really gained notoriety during the pandemic, was specifically targeted by the White House to silence him. Epidemiologists from Harvard and Stanford all shut down. And the CDC involved in this whole mess as well. Where do you want to start here?
Well, unfortunately, this isn't the first time the CDC has been caught putting politics above science. At the end of last year, it came out that they were letting the National Education Association, the largest teachers union, kind of call the shots in terms of masking of children at schools. But now, in the last week or so, emails have come out with the Freedom of Information Act request showing that gun control activists were lobbying the CDC on what they were going to have up on their website, that apparently the CDC had information from a National Academy of Sciences report on the rate of defensive gun uses. And the gun control activists were upset because they argued that that information was being used to stop types of gun control laws that they wanted to get passed. It doesn't seem like a particularly appropriate thing for activists to be arguing to the CDC, or the CDC should be taking into account. What happened
to me, Doctor, and this is the area that you work. You're an economist by trade. You study gun statistics and data at length and a variety of other things. The CDC should be looking at data sets, comparing data sets, not getting involved with the politics. They should look at numbers. Shouldn't that be what drives the CDC? Actual numbers, actual statistics, actual results of actual, and I would dare say, peer-reviewed studies. Wouldn't that be the place to be?
You would think. Whether or not particular statistics or facts are useful in the gun control debate in terms of whether laws get passed or not, doesn't seem like it's something that should ever pass anybody's lips in terms of a consideration as far as the CDC is concerned. Look, to be honest, I'm not even sure why the CDC is involved in gun control issues. I know they've been given $50 million over the last few years in order to go and study that issue, pay for research that's been done. But they're not criminologists by trade. It's not an area of real expertise on their part. But what's happened is that Democrats in Congress have seen polls, I think, that show that criminologists and economists are fairly skeptical of gun control. Public health people are much more supportive of gun control. And so they go, over the last 3 years, have given $100 million between the CDC and the National Institute of Health in order to go and study this. So they have lots of stuff up on the website with regard to it. But there was a National Academy of Sciences report that indicated that as many as 3.5 million times a year people use guns defensively to stop crime. The CDC...
But that doesn't make it to the paper. That doesn't make it to the 6 o'clock news. That doesn't make it, because if a mass shooting doesn't happen, you don't hear about it. Maybe a little blurb here or there. The kid at the mall in Indianapolis stopped a mass shooter. You heard about him because he had the nerve to shoot somebody with a legally owned handgun. But those are the rare exceptions to the rule. It gets no coverage. These networks specifically ignore it. The social media platforms specifically seem to censor it. They're all in cahoots with the CDC and the Biden administration and the leftists in general, because the message is guns are bad. And there is a shift happening, from what I can tell, Doctor, with young people in America. They have a lot less affection for firearms than your generation, than our generation, right?
Unfortunately, I think you're right. Look, it's hard for people to get around the bias. You have massive uh, you know, bias in terms of the news coverage. You have massive bias in terms of entertainment television. Uh, we go at the Crime Prevention Research Center, we keep track of entertainment police shows. You will search in vain over the last 15 years or so to find successful defensive gun use as portrayed on TV. What happens, virtually except for Yellowstone show, which has shown two successful defensive gun uses, every other defensive gun use has something go wrong. Either the wrong person shot, or they get in the way of the police and prevent the police from doing their job, or the gun's taken away from the person and used against them or used in another crime. Uh, you know, and you look at the news coverage. We did a report last year that looked at all the news coverage on defensive gun uses in the United States. If you look at the top 5 newspapers, for example, the New York Times, the LA Times, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, the Washington Post, between those 5 papers, you'll find a grand total of 10 defensive gun uses. Most of those had something go wrong. By contrast, they had over 1,700 news stories about somebody being killed or injured in a gun crime, over 2,700 gun crime stories in total. If you add in CNN and MSNBC, they had 0 defensive gun use stories. So you could be somebody who you consider to be very well read. You keep up on the news, you read all the top publications, you watch CNN and MSNBC religiously, and you never hear about defensive gun uses, and maybe the once or twice that you hear about it, something goes wrong. So it's not too surprising that people who consider themselves very well informed would come away thinking, well, if I could only get rid of guns, then, these bad things won't happen, and we don't really.
But it doesn't work that way. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. And in a practical application, John, you and I have talked about this a number of times. Look, gun sales continue to set records month after month, year after year. If the push is to get rid of guns in America, they're doing a wretched job of getting that done. Because by the time they get to such a thing, we're at what, 350 million, maybe 400 million guns in America? Nobody's sure, right?
Look,
by the time they get around to it, you'll have 500 million. And every time they talk about banning AR-15s, they clear the shelves.
Look,
so then what?
Yeah, look, the notion that you're going to stop criminals from getting guns just isn't serious. Look at Mexico. Since 1972, there's been one gun store in Mexico. It's been run by the military. The most powerful gun you've been able to legally buy in Mexico is a .22 caliber short-run rifle. And yet, Mexico in many years had murder rates that are 5 or 6 times higher than the murder rate in the United States. The drug gangs there bring in weapons from around the world just as they go and they bring in illegal drugs that they go and traffic that's there. The same thing would happen here in the United States. We've tried gun bans in Chicago and Washington, D.C. And what happened is the same thing you see every single place in the world that's tried to ban all guns or all handguns, and that is
they're trying. They're doing pretty well in Canada. Chairman Trudeau seems to be well on the way to outlawing guns. Chairman Jacinda, whatever her name is in New Zealand, same thing. I got to leave it there, John. Some places, though, really cleaning out the guns. Places like Canada, never thought they'd go after all the long guns, and yet that seems to be where they're going. Dr. John Lott, appreciate seeing you. Merry Christmas, and I hope you have a good New Year. I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Happy New Year.
There you have it, Dr. John Lott. He is like the encyclopedia of information when it comes to all of these things, which is why he is here. There is no better expert available to us or to you. Coming up after the break, Taiwan is taking steps to protect itself against a possible Chinese invasion.